At our first stop, passengers don't board a train. Instead, they're able to relive the most significant rail event in U.S. history, the completion of the Transcontinental Railway. On May 10, 1869, in Promontory Summit, Utah, East met West. And with the driving of a single golden spike, our country was changed forever.
This National Historic Park is located an hour-and-a-half's drive north of Salt Lake City, at a spot where the wide open plains turned out to be the perfect place to make transportation history. Even today, Promontory Summit is a place frozen in time. It's like the clock just stopped on that day, when the nation focused its attention on this sagebrush-covered high desert.
The landscape here remains largely unchanged. There were probably more tent structures and more activity here on May 10, 1869 than there is today. Luckily today we don't have any modern intrusions.
That's what makes Golden Spike National Historic Site such a treasure. In the blink of an eye, it takes you back to that incredible moment in 1869 when two ribbons of iron met and the steam-powered engines that built America could finally carry freight and passengers from coast to coast.
Building this railroad was the modern equivalent of building the pyramids. It was this huge feat of hand labor and hand construction.
It took a lot of sweat, engineering, and negotiating to make this incredible feat happen. Two railroads, thousands of workers, and wealthy businessmen on both coasts, along with a few Washington politicians, had to hammer out the details. The Pacific Railway Act of 1862 opened up the floodgates for federal money to pay for construction of a rail line across the continent. The Union Pacific workers headed west from the Missouri River, while the Central Pacific crews started working east from Sacramento, California.
The Union Pacific was actually trying to build beyond Ogden and strand their rivals out in the desert where they would go broke, not having access to the trade of the Salt Lake Basin. Because of that, they just kept building towards one another, and it actually took a government act to establish the meeting point here at Promontory.
Once the meeting spot was set, the crews wanted to make their mark. In Wyoming, the Union Pacific workers laid 7 miles of track in a single day, setting a pace they said could never be topped. But it was. On April 28, 1869, hundreds of Central Pacific workers set out to break the record, placing ties and setting out spikes to lay 10 miles of track in a single day. Today you can follow the path they laid across the desert at the Golden Spike National Historic Site.
We have 2 auto tours where you can drive right on the original 1869 railroad grade, right where the trains went. So you can take your own scenic railway journey through the park here, through Promontory, and experience what it was like riding in those coaches across the country.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the officials of both railroad companies, the Central Pacific and the Union Pacific, I bid you welcome.
Today, the National Park Service keeps this moment in history alive by recreating this historic transportation event when the two lines met, with volunteers and a pair of steam engines identical to the Jupiter and the 119 that were used that day.
We're met today to celebrate the completion of a remarkable example of the vision, determination, and the labor of thousands of men in a union which this day shall be consummated forever.
It's like opening a history book and watching the characters come to life.
In conclusion, I should like to draw your attention to this spike, the gift of David Hughes of San Francisco. On its head is inscribed the last spike. On 3 sides, the names of railroad officials, and on the 4th side, this sentence: "May God continue the unity of our country as this railroad unites the 2 great oceans of the world."
The official Golden Spike was one of several commemorative spikes driven in that day. But the railroad officials were off the mark, so they had to call in one of the rail workers to get the job done. Then the news was sent out by telegraph across the nation.
Promontory to the country. Bulletin. D-O-N-E. Done.
technology of communication and transportation would bring Americans together just a few years after a long and bitter war had torn them apart.
We forget what a great accomplishment that this was and what a significant national event that it was. It was probably the first full coverage media event with live coverage here via the telegraph. It was so important. It was celebrated all over this country almost simultaneously.
I remember reading about this when I was a child and seeing it in books. My children watched shows about trains, and they know about some of the stories that go with that, and this will be something that I hope they remember.
I think it's important for kids to know about the history of our country, and bringing them to an event like this lets them see it in action instead of just reading it in a book, so they can kind of have a concept of what really happened. And it's fun besides.
The moment the rail lines met has been called one of the most important events in Western history.
And just like these locomotives and this site, it'll be here for our great-great-great-grandchildren, and that's what's important, so that we remember the significance of what was accomplished here.